They were lowering the casket when Vanessa leaned in, close enough that her breath grazed my ear. Her voice was silk-thin, almost tender, as she whispered, "You have 1 week to get out." I didn't flinch. I didn't turn. I just tightened my grip on the funeral program in my lap, creasing the edge until my knuckles turned white. The priest's voice continued in the background, speaking of closure, of peace, of letting go, but my son, Jason, was being lowered into the earth, and all I could feel was the ice of betrayal slipping beneath my skin. Before we get started, I'd love to hear where you're watching from, and if you haven't done so yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Jason was 34. Healthy, strong. A sudden heart attack had taken him in his sleep. No warning, no goodbye. He was my only child. The one who used to call every Sunday, who made me promise to move in after his father died so I wouldn't be alone. And now, as his casket disappeared into the ground, the only family I had left was asking me to disappear too. Vanessa stood up, adjusting her black designer dress, dabbing delicately at dry eyes with a tissue too white to be real. Behind me, someone whispered, "She's been so brave." Brave. I wanted to laugh, but grief sat heavy on my chest, a stone I couldn't move. I stayed silent during the prayer, the final hymn, the murmurs of guests offering condolences. Vanessa moved among them like a perfect widow, polished, graceful, tearless. She helped her elderly grandmother to the car, posed for a few photos by the memorial table, accepted a warm embrace from Jason's boss, and all the while, not once did she look in my direction. No one questioned why I stood alone on the grass. No one noticed how tightly I held my purse, the one where I kept the house keys. I rode back with her, in Jason's car. The scent of his cologne still lingered in the seats. She didn't say a word, not a single word. But she didn't need to. Because when someone tells you to leave while your son is being buried, they're not asking. They're warning you. And I knew, from that moment forward, that grief wasn't the only thing I'd have to survive. The first sign was subtle. My nightstand lamp was unplugged. I'd been out in the garden that morning, trying to feel something other than numbness. When I came back in, the room felt colder. My bed was made too tightly, the blankets folded in a way I never did. The drawers of my dresser sat slightly ajar, like someone had opened them but didn't care to hide it. Then, I noticed the boxes. 3 of them, labeled in neat handwriting. Mom's things. They were stacked near the closet. My closet. As if I were already gone. I found Vanessa in the kitchen, stirring cream into her coffee, dressed like it was any other Tuesday. "Did you move my things?" I asked gently. She looked up with practiced calm. "Oh, just organizing. I figured it might help when you're ready." She said it as if she were offering me a favor, her voice light, as if this were all perfectly reasonable. I pressed further. "My jewelry box is missing." "It's in the safe," she replied, not even blinking. You wouldn't want something to go missing with so many guests in and out lately. I hadn't asked her to touch a single item. "I never said I was leaving," I said, keeping my voice steady. She gave me a tight smile. "Jason and I had talked about it. It's not personal. We just assumed you'd want to go back to your sisters." "I don't have a sister. She knows that. She always has." It was then that I realized this wasn't thoughtlessness. It was intent. She wasn't waiting for me to leave. She was crafting the illusion that I already had. That night, when the house grew quiet, I pulled out the small lockbox I kept under my bed. It was gone. My fingers trembled as I opened the closet, pulling down an old storage bin. Inside, I found what looked like discarded receipts, outdated mail, and then my folder. The one with my medical records, my banking papers, my passport. But the most important page, the deed to the house, was missing. And that's when I understood. Vanessa wasn't just moving things around. She was erasing me, one drawer at a time. I waited until Vanessa left for her midday Pilates class before I slipped into the attic. Jason used to keep things up there, old army files, tax folders, moving boxes he never unpacked. It wasn't a space Vanessa liked. She'd once said it smelled like dust and sadness. Maybe that's why I knew it was the one place she wouldn't think to sanitize. The air was thick with insulation and forgotten time. I pushed aside a bin marked home maintenance and reached behind a row of paint cans. My hands brushed something hard and flat, a file box covered in fine dust. My breath caught when I opened it. There it was, the envelope Jason and I signed together when we bought the house. We'd split the down payment. I used the last of my savings so he and Vanessa could start fresh. He wanted me to live with them. Said, "It's your home too, Mom." So we added my name to the deed. I pulled the folder open. It was all still there. The deed, notarized. Both our signatures. A stamped copy from the county recorder's office. It hadn't been misplaced. It had been removed. Vanessa hadn't just assumed I'd leave. She was betting I wouldn't know how much of the house was legally mine. But I did. I climbed down from the attic with the file pressed to my chest, like it might vanish if I loosened my grip. She was waiting in the kitchen, swirling wine in a glass like nothing in the world could touch her. "Looking for something?" she asked, eyebrows lifted. "Just organizing," I replied, mirroring her own excuse. That night, I scanned every page into my email. Then I made 3 copies, one for a safe deposit box, one hidden under the floorboards of my closet, and one I sealed in an envelope marked, "Mr. Spencer, confidential." Jason had recommended him years ago when we updated our wills, a lawyer who knew the law, and more importantly, remembered his name. Vanessa thought she'd cleared the board, but she'd forgotten who helped build it. And now I had the one thing she feared most: proof. That evening, around 9, Vanessa knocked softly on my door with 2 glasses of wine in hand. Her expression was gentle, rehearsed, the kind that looks warm to the untrained eye but feels colder the longer you stare at it. "I figured we should talk," she said, offering me a glass. "Clear the air." I accepted it but didn't drink, just held it between my palms as she sat across from me on the couch, her posture relaxed, but her eyes scanning my face like she was trying to measure something beneath the surface. "I know things have been tense," she began, "but Jason always said this house was for us, for our future family." I said nothing. She looked down at her wine. "I don't want this to get ugly. I just want to move forward." I waited a beat, then asked, "Have you spoken to a lawyer?" That startled her. Just enough to notice. Her hand twitched slightly on the stem of the glass. "No," she said too quickly. "I didn't think it was necessary." I smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." Her lips parted in a flicker of confusion. "Are you threatening me, Margaret?" "Not at all," I said, my voice calm. "Just thinking out loud." She stood, slower this time. "I hope we can do this the easy way." "So do I." When she walked out, I waited until I heard her retreat down the hallway. Then I pulled out my phone and reopened the scanned deed with my name printed clear as daylight. The next morning, I met with Mr. Spencer. He greeted me with firm eyes and a memory sharper than most. He remembered Jason, remembered our shared appointment years ago. After I showed him the documents, the deed, the contribution, receipt, and proof of co-residence, he nodded. "She has no legal standing," he said simply, "and if she tries to evict you, she'll lose." He instructed me to keep gathering records, utility bills, mortgage updates, anything that showed my presence and participation. "Don't confront her," he said. "Document everything. Let her walk herself into the truth." So I did. From that day on, every conversation, every glance, every slip of the tongue, I stored it away, one silent thread at a time. Because I wasn't just staying. I was building my defense in the language Vanessa never understood: patience. It started with soft sniffling in the kitchen. I walked in to find Vanessa standing by the window in her silk robe, a crumpled tissue in one hand, the other resting lightly on her stomach. The light caught her face just enough to highlight a well-timed tear gliding down her cheek. She turned, startled but composed, and offered a brittle smile. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sometimes it just hits me again." I didn't respond. I knew a performance when I saw one. Then she said it, softly, as though it might shatter in the air if spoken too loudly. "I'm pregnant, Margaret." The words didn't land like she expected. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to embrace her. I simply blinked, calculating. "How far along?" I asked, my voice even. 8, maybe 9 weeks, she answered quickly. Jason had been gone 10. My body went still, but my mind flared awake. I didn't confront her. Not yet. She placed a sonogram photo on the counter like a chess piece. "He and I talked about using a donor, just in case," she added, her voice trembling in just the right places. "He wanted me to have a piece of him, even if he was already buried when the scan was taken." I picked up the image, examined the date in the corner printed 4 weeks ago, neatly typed. From a clinic I didn't recognize. I handed it back without a word. She smiled gently. "I hope now you understand how important it is for me to have stability, for the baby's sake." It wasn't a plea, it was a strategy. Later that day, I forwarded the image to Mr. Spencer, along with the matching timestamp from a file I'd seen in her tote, one labeled e-signatures 2023, dated the same week as the scan. He called within the hour. "This helps us," he said. "If she's trying to claim hardship or dependency, we can subpoena medical records. If it's false, it's fraud." I asked him what to do. He replied, "Document, observe, don't react." So I smiled at her the next morning, folded laundry beside her as she hummed lullabies for a child that wasn't Jason's. Because now I knew she wasn't grieving, she was staging. And she had no idea I was already 2 moves ahead. It arrived like a secret slipped beneath the door, a manila envelope with "urgent 48 hours notice" typed in bold. I opened it slowly, already knowing what I would find. Vanessa had drawn her line in the sand. Inside was a printed document, dressed in formal language, but lacking one thing that gave it real weight: a court stamp. It wasn't a legal notice, it was a performance, like everything else she had done. But this time, she had gone too far. The letter claimed I had exhibited signs of emotional instability, and that my continued presence posed a risk to the safety of her and her unborn child. It concluded with a threat. If I did not vacate the property within 48 hours, law enforcement would be involved, and possible charges of elder neglect could be pursued. I sat there for a moment, the letter trembling in my hands, not out of fear but disbelief. She had crossed from cruelty into fiction. I folded the document carefully, added it to the growing stack in my folder labeled Vanessa Evidence, and drove straight to Mr. Spencer's office without an appointment. He read the letter twice, eyes narrowing as he reached the final line. "She's accusing you of elder neglect?" he asked, incredulous. "While you are the one being manipulated, surveilled, and displaced?" I nodded. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "This is no longer a family dispute. This is a legal ambush built on fraud, and it's unraveling fast." I placed everything on his desk: the forged timeline of the pregnancy, the doctored ultrasound, the metadata trail linking her to the will, and now this false eviction notice. He sorted through it all with the calm precision of someone who knew exactly what to do. "We're filing today," he said firmly. "Motion to freeze property transfer, fraud alert, and court-ordered investigation into the will." "For the first time," I replied, "I don't feel like I'm defending myself anymore." "You're not," he said. "You're correcting a lie." And as I walked out of his office, I felt something lift, not revenge, not triumph, but the quiet weight of truth finding its voice. Vanessa had played her final hand, and now it was my turn. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Vanessa arrived draped in cream, a delicate blouse tucked beneath a soft blazer, her expression the perfect portrait of composed grief. In her hand, she clutched the ultrasound photo like it was a sacred relic. Her lawyer began with the usual gentle tones, careful words painting her as the heartbroken widow carrying the future of a family alone. But Mr. Spencer let them finish. Then he stood and laid it all bare. The forged signature on the draft will, presented side by side with Jason's true handwriting. The sonogram with a date that contradicted the timeline of his death. The eviction letter with false legal threats. The metadata files tracing back to Vanessa's personal computer, linking her directly to each manipulation. And then the deed. My name, Jason's signature. The notarized seal. A quiet click echoed through the room as the judge flipped through the file, brows furrowing in silent disbelief. Then he leaned forward and spoke, not with emotion, but clarity. "This is extremely clear." His pen tapped against the desk. "Margaret is a legal co-owner of the property. All eviction claims are hereby voided. As for the will," he paused, eyes narrowing, "subject to fraud investigation." Vanessa's face drained of color. She turned to her attorney, whispered something fast, but he didn't respond. His silence said everything. And I didn't move. No celebration, no smirk, just stillness. Because this wasn't a victory march. This was justice, slow, quiet, and absolute. As I stood to leave, Mr. Spencer leaned toward me and said, "Now we wait. She'll either push back or she'll pack." Outside the courthouse, I glanced at my phone and saw the email. Ownership status confirmed. Full legal recognition. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. But inside, something loosened, the last thread of fear finally undone. She could twist the truth, rewrite the story, forge the lines. But now, the law had spoken. And the house, the one I helped build, the one she tried to steal, had found its rightful voice again. Mine. It was tucked in the back of Jason's drawer, the one I hadn't opened since the funeral. I wasn't looking for anything. Not really. I just wanted to touch something that still felt like him. But what I found was more than a keepsake. It was a folded sheet of paper, yellowed slightly at the edges, dated 3 weeks before he died. The handwriting was unmistakably his, sharp, thoughtful, and deeply familiar. It began simply, "If anything happens to me, I need you to know I'm sorry." The words slowed my breath. I read on. He wrote about the pressure, about Vanessa, about how she'd slowly chipped away at his relationships, isolating him, controlling who he called, what he said, even how he grieved his own father. He wrote about how he didn't know how to tell me without making it worse. "She makes me feel like I have to choose sides. I hate that I've let her make you feel unwelcome. I see it now." And then, at the bottom, in darker ink, as if it had been written in one burst, "Don't let her take everything. This house was always ours, not hers. Do what you have to do, Mom." I scanned it into my phone and slipped the letter into the same drawer where the deed lived side by side, just like we were. That evening, Vanessa returned home with fire in her eyes. She'd heard whispers about the ruling, about the investigation. She slammed her bag onto the counter, pointed a trembling finger at me, and spat, "I'll go to the press. I'll tell them everything, how you bullied me, how you manipulated my grief." I didn't flinch. "I'll show them the ultrasound," she added. "They'll believe a grieving widow." I stood slowly and said, calm and steady, "Then I'll show them the clinic's timestamp, the metadata on the will, and the letter your husband left me in his own hand." She froze. That, she didn't know about. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. And in that silence, something shattered. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. It was about the one thing she couldn't forge, the truth from the man she claimed to love. And I had it. In ink, in his words. In the very thing she could never rewrite. She began packing on a Tuesday. No grand announcement, no apology, just the slow sound of boxes being taped shut behind a closed bedroom door. I heard the clinking of glass, the rustle of clothes folded without care, and the occasional low voice on the phone, urgent, desperate, hushed. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't offer help. By Thursday, the hallway outside her room was lined with cardboard boxes, some labeled, some not. A half-rolled rug leaned against the wall, next to a suitcase that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Her movements were efficient, but her silence betrayed her. She was running out of stories and out of power. That morning, she came into the kitchen holding her last bag. Her makeup was light, her smile forced. She stood at the counter for a long moment before finally speaking. "I'll be out by Friday," she said, voice low. I didn't look up from my tea. "All right." She hesitated, then added, "You can have your house back." That made me look up. I met her eyes, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something steadier. "This house," I said calmly, was never yours to return. Her face faltered. For a moment, I saw the woman she might have been, not cruel, just broken in the wrong ways. But the damage had already been done. She didn't reply, just turned and left the room, the door clicking behind her. I didn't follow. I didn't watch from the window. I let her leave the way she arrived into my life, with noise behind her and emptiness ahead. That evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen. Not for mourning, not for celebration, just to honor stillness. Because in the end, it wasn't revenge that gave me peace. It was knowing I didn't have to raise my voice to reclaim what was already mine. And as the house exhaled beside me, walls no longer holding tension, footsteps no longer careful, I whispered to the quiet, "My house, my rules." And this time, no one challenged me. The silence felt different now. Not the tense hush of walking on eggshells, not the heavy quiet of holding back truth. This silence was soft, expansive, like a room finally breathing again. I spent the weekend unpacking the last of my boxes. The ones Vanessa had labeled for removal were now tucked neatly into the corners of rooms I once tiptoed through. Jason's photo returned to the entryway shelf, his favorite blanket folded at the foot of the recliner she once tried to replace. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just peace, quiet, warm, unshakable. Then, on Sunday afternoon, I found it a small silver flash drive left on the coffee table, resting atop an empty coaster. No label, no note. Vanessa never left anything behind without a reason. For a moment, I considered tossing it into the trash, but I'd learned by now loose ends don't stay quiet forever. So I plugged it into Jason's old laptop, the one she never touched because she said it smelled like dust and regret. One folder. One file. Open me. I did. The video flickered to life. Vanessa sat in Jason's office chair, lips painted, eyes sharp. She looked straight into the webcam and said, "If you're watching this, then I've left, or you think you've won." Her voice was calm, smug, still playing her last hand. "You were never supposed to stay here forever, Margaret," she continued. "You were a placeholder. Jason was too weak to say it, so I did it for him." I paused the video. Not because I couldn't listen, but because I didn't need to. She had spent so long trying to erase me, to rewrite a version of reality where I didn't belong. But the house itself remembered. The floors I mopped, the walls Jason and I painted, the front door I helped choose. This space was not built on manipulation or schemes. It was built on presence, real, lived in, earned. I ejected the flash drive, dropped it in the trash, and closed the laptop for good. That evening, I lit a single candle and sat by the window, watching the porch she once tried to claim. And in the quiet, I whispered again, not out of defiance, but certainty. "My house, my rules." And this time, the words didn't echo. They settled, like they had always belonged.